Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Cat B and Andy B Inspired Connections podcast. We are coming to you today transatlantic from the UK, Canada, and the USA. In this podcast, we explore how inspired connections have impacted people's lives positively and demonstrate how you too can experience those inspired connections in your life as well. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about what true strength, courage, and perseverance really looks like. We will also demonstrate that even when we suffer multiple traumas in our lives, we can still step up and serve others while we are weathering our own storms. Without further ado, let me welcome my beautiful co-host, Kat B, and our incredibly special guest today, Dennis Z. How's everybody doing today?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Andy. Great. Dennis, I'm so excited that you're here. Me and Andy are so proud that you're our next guest because you are just a bundle of fun. If anybody ever knows Dennis or comes to meet him through our communities, he's always the person that brings laughter, a lot of F-bombs, and a lot of great times and a lot of great conversation. And he's here to tell us kind of like about his inspired connections and how they started. Dennis, take us away. Introduce yourself, my darling.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thanks, guys. I obviously love both of you to pieces. And I'm hoping what I have to say has something that could resonate with people. I've never been a big, strong believer in the spirits and everything else. And my father passed away 42 plus years ago. In thinking about things, I always talked to my father. I always asked him questions. I always asked for his guidance in business and in life. And it took many years to realize that him answering me and everything was him just being beside me and helping me and guiding me through my life. And when I lost my son 4 years ago, I definitely wasn't a believer in the afterlife, spirits, mediumship, or anything. And it took actually Kat to turn me around and make me realize that yes, my father had been there the whole time with me and guided me, but also my son was there and was safe, which was important to me. And realized Kat changed my life at that point after losing Michael and just changed everything for me, my marriage, which was difficult. And just made it so that I can't even describe, it's hard for me to describe. It made it possible to realize everything was okay. And I needed that so much. I didn't want to do a reading, and I'm not sure it was through Mike Edwards at Helping Fathers Heal who introduced me to Kat. Actually, I think Kat, you did a reading for the group. And
She did a gallery read for the group. I remember it.
yeah, and
I remember.
I was really impressed, and I booked an appointment with you, which was amazing. But no, Mike Edwards, he helped me so much. Shannon was part of Helping Parents Heal, and for months, she used to go. We had a place by the lake, and she would go every week and listen to the Helping Parents Heal. And I'd say, "What are you doing listening?" And I was the one saying, "Why are you wasting your time? Why, so on, so on, so on." And she came to me. She goes, "Well, you know what? They have a Helping Fathers Heal group. Why don't you check it out?" And I remember going on, and I listened once in the background, and I creeped it for a while, and I'd listen and listen. And then one day, Mike, caught me and talked, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, somehow I get to talk a little bit more than ever now. But it Helping Fathers Heal opened my mind and saved my life. I honestly can say I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't for Helping Fathers Heal. And I go to counselors, I go to everything else. Mike Edwards, Andy, who's become a very good friend, and I'm not going to get into the endorsement, but Helping Fathers Heal is, I can't even say enough about it. So that opened my mind to everything in my life and how I kind of guide myself now in my beliefs and where I'm going.
Yeah. Well, doors away, man. It's. I remember your first meeting. I remember you telling your story because at that point we always kind of we told stories because there weren't that many of us yet. But yeah, I talk about perseverance and strength at the beginning of the show. You're who I think of, right? Because when I heard Michael's story and how you navigated that, right? I mean, it was, we sit here in the grief community and we all have our stories. We all have our trauma. We all have the things that we've experienced, and they're horrible. Don't get me wrong. But when you hear another dad's story, you're like, oh, right. You just at least I totally empathize and I kind of feel the pain. So that's when you and I really started to connect, because I was just like, it's, how you just connect with people and that's how it started for me, watching you do your testimony for the first time.
Well, it was the hardest thing. So it was probably 8-9 months at least after Michael's passing that I joined. And it took a little while, but I was always telling everybody my son had an accident at the office. I think that was what I said the first time I talked in Helping Fathers Heal. And then after listening and becoming part of the group, I finally said in the group, my son committed suicide. He hung himself. And I went through that. And since that day, I don't lie. I tell everybody, yes, Michael had troubles and he committed suicide. And I'm not afraid to say that anymore. And that is because of the Helping Fathers Heal. It really brought that around and made it real to me.
Why did you feel really challenged by sharing that he committed suicide?
I think the big thing was an embarrassment. Coming from an old school European family, I know everybody says that, but also my family was a very prominent family where we grew up and in Canada, my father being such a successful businessman. And I felt, and growing up, I'm in my mid-60s, so growing up, it was kind of a bad thing, suicide. It was, I don't know, it's just something. And then growing up as a Catholic, being Catholic, that was a bad thing. We were taught, commit suicide, you're not going to heaven. You're going to be in this limbo land. And I talked to my children growing up about suicide and saying, don't ever commit suicide. And because, I want to be with you when I'm gone and you won't be, I talked like that to them. And when Michael committed suicide, it was just, I remember talking to the priest before we had to take Michael off life support. And I shared my concern and he sat with me and it was the best thing that happened. He explained to me, no, that's old school Catholic. And it's not like that, Dennis. He will go to heaven. He will. And that took such a load off of me mentally, especially because I knew I was going to have to let Michael go. And I was hanging on so much because I didn't want to, this was going to be the end. I'd never see him again in my mind. So thinking and telling people, my son committed suicide, I did something wrong. That's kind of how I was thinking. Now, especially in Canada has a very big mental awareness now for suicide. And it's become a much more open thing that I'm glad. And I'm one to preach. I talk to young kids still that I'm involved in a Notre Dame rowing club here. And I have a lot of kids that know that Michael committed suicide. And they come talk to me. And it's shocked. I get shocked that some of these young kids come and say, my parents don't understand or this. And I know your son committed suicide. And I've been thinking about it. And I'll talk to them and just tell them, I said, I wish I could have told Michael how it would make me and the rest of the family feel with his loss. But I know that with mental challenges, I understand where, and how and why he did what he did. So yeah, it was, Kat, sorry, that was a very long answer.
No. I think it's going to resonate with so many people that have had that experience because I think guilt, shame, embarrassed. I think the honesty there and the integrity of it, Dennis, is really what people need to understand. It's a very complex set of emotions, because the way that society in the past has viewed it is not with the eyes of compassion as we view it now. And so that I do think there's a shift happening, and I think people are being braver and understanding that this is a mental disease that causes situations that could be momentary or could be planned, but they are challenging. And it's very difficult for a parent to deal with, because the parent doesn't understand, because we love our children and we don't like to think of the idea that they don't want to be here with us. We've invested all our time into them, all this love and compassion, and we hope that we've taught them well. And there you are teaching Michael about all the different ways that, you know, you hope he's going to grow and develop, and how you want to prevent this from happening. And the one thing that you taught him actually happens, which is something that comes up in a lot of my experience of reading, sitting with parents on a voluntary basis, listening to their stories. Dennis, so I don't think that's unusual at all, and I think you're really brave. And to also to sort of share, like, the background of the status with regard to that, of you are a prominent family, you are business people, you're intelligent people, you've taught your kids, you've educated your kids, you know, and that's really hard, because you've tried to defend them, empower them and protect them. You've tried to keep them safe. And regardless of everything that you've done, the most awful sort of situation has occurred, and it's heartbreaking. And I'm sure in the bag of that, coming across somebody of my profession must have been also extremely challenging, Dennis. I know you like that. I'm talking honestly. Before you met me and before you got to know me, you probably perceived what I do as very challenging stuff too.
Well, and it was, because for me, I am fairly analytical, and I looked at the science side, saying, yeah, my son's gone. Who are we talking to? He doesn't have a brain. How can he think? He doesn't have anything. What's a soul? What's, like, what is all this? It does scientifically, it makes no sense. That's how I was thinking. Then when you really think about what are we? We are energy. Our whole body is a source of energy. And what is the soul? What is going? And who we're talking to when you are relaying messages from the other side to us, that's a source of energy. All we were was a vessel here on earth of flesh that energy was in. So, I look at it now, it's taken a long time, a lot of reading, a lot of thanking God for helping parents heal, because I got to meet people like yourself, Kat, and others, and the scientific Gary, on the scientific side, where he could explain so much that makes so much sense to people like myself, that it saved me. It really did. It saved me a lot, knowing those people and getting to understand it much more.
And let's be fair as well, Shannon, I met your lovely wife, who's now in spirit as well, and at the time that I met you, Dennis, Shannon was here, and she was very skeptical. She didn't want to come anywhere near me. Is that fair enough? She was really, and your son actually was the one that was like, my mum's not here, this is the evidence, this is what she needs to hear. And in the end, she came into the reading, didn't she? And it was really powerful.
Well, he kept at, we were, as you were going through the reading, I had my two daughters, if you remember, that was with us. So it was the three of us. And Michael would be talking through you, and he kept saying, well, where's mom? Where's mom? And he kept asking for mom. And I would call her. She was in the house downstairs, and she said, no, I'm, whatever. And she wouldn't come up. And finally, through Michael's persistence, and I told her that Michael kept asking, she came up. And if you remember, he had some messages for her, and she did. She cried, and she had quite a different feeling afterwards, big time. And that opened her up quite a bit as well.
It's so interesting, isn't it, how the transition of a child impacts a family. But I think what really touched me is that you were all open. You came as a family. You came with your two daughters. They were absolutely lovely, Dennis. It was a very family atmosphere. They got to ask questions as well. They got messages from the brother. How did it impact the children? Because when I say children, they were adolescents. Were they 16 and 18 at the time, Dennis?
Yeah, I think that's what they were in that area. It really impacted. Well, so my daughter, Leah, used to always say she could speak to the other side, and I always said, yeah, whatever. Okay, she's full of shit. She was a young kid, teenager, and I just kind of went with it. Then I realized she really was. And I don't know if she still does. We don't talk about that, but she was very connected. And if you remember, a lot of that reading was directed towards my two girls, and I'm glad they needed it. And some of the things that made it so real. I'll never forget the one that Rhiannon wrote. Rhiannon, at one point, Michael said, I was there, someone kissed my forehead and brushed my hair just before they closed the casket. And Rhiannon started to cry because Rhiannon kissed his forehead, brushed his hair, and Michael said, I was there, Rhiannon. And that just, she didn't tell any of us, so she knew. And that opened her heart so much. And then everything thereafter, I know it meant a lot to the girls, it meant a ton to me. And yeah, I can't, still today, I listen to it, and it's, after that reading, it was like, okay, I'm going to call Kat every day because I want to talk to Michael every day. It was like a whole world. You're my telephone to the other side. And it was amazing.
Your journey continued then. That's what I like about it, Dennis, that you met more inspirational people, because I'm not the only light worker out there. And one thing that I always say to people is go experience lots of different people, because everybody's got a different style, everyone's got a different vocabulary. And both you and Andy really did. Actually, you took that advice and you ran with it. But we equally, we talk about perseverance. You've had this experience, and then suddenly Shannon transitions as well, which was a real shock to me, Dennis. I actually was completely floored when I saw your email, and it was the memorial. And explain to us the bits in between, like what happened.
Well, when we lost Michael, like so many marriages, we went through. It was tough. Losing a child, it doesn't. I was 32 years with my wife. We were together. And for me, they were 32 of the absolutely best years of my life. But when we lost Michael, it was tough. We fought, but I fought very hard, as Andy knows, because the Helping Fathers Heal group helped me get through a lot of those times. And
did you think your marriage was going to break down, Dennis? Did you think it was going to end in divorce?
Well, I was worried. Hearing a lot of the stories on Helping Fathers Heal of the men that have lost her, including our what we called our fearless leader, Mike. His marriage didn't survive it as well, and I was pretty afraid because I did not want to lose my wife. And I knew that this happened before we took Michael off life support. I'll never forget, 2 days before, and I remember saying to Shannon, I said, honey, if we lose Michael, this hurts a lot of marriages and they don't survive it. And I'm telling you now, we got to stay together and be strong because I don't want to lose you. And she said, I don't want to lose you either, and everything at that time. And when we lost Michael, it did. It affected us both. I think a lot of it for me, our mind, I was numb for so long. I shut down the world. I shut everything down. Physically did not leave an area of my house, and I literally just mentally everything shut down. It was very tough for me, and I think that's what hurts a marriage.
This is so important, Dennis, because I was reading for a family this morning who were going through the exact same thing, and I was trying to explain to them that this is normal, that people grieve differently, that they have different experiences, and you can't compare each other's journey because it is different. It's going at different paces. It looks different. The the family this morning, there was resentment for the fact that the husband had turned to alcohol, but he'd gained sobriety back. He had done the hard work to really fight back for his life and for his marriage. And then now there was judgments about that situation, and it was causing conflict. And it actually is, what was really struck me is that they both adore each other, they both love each other, and they're a really beautiful couple. And there was nothing wrong with them or their marriage. It was the complexity of grief that wasn't understood and was going at different paces or speeds for the two individuals, and they couldn't celebrate the differences.
And that's what happened with Shannon.
And that's the whole reason why we have a Helping Fathers Heal, because men typically will isolate, right? We typically do self-medicate, right? And we do distract. You know, we've got dads that do every single one of those, if not all three of them, to the 10th fold. And yeah, Dennis will totally get this. What's the worst thing a man can be in American culture or Western culture? Weak. And so if we're breaking down and we're not strong in front of our family, you know, and it's not right. I'm not saying it's right. And I'm not saying every man is like that, but I don't know, talk to 40 grieving men every week. And I'd say the majority of us feel like that or felt like that at some point. And so our partners in our lives need to understand, like you said so eloquently, Kat, we grieve differently. Totally differently. It's not one's better than the other, although I think the women are way better at it than we are. But in a relationship like that, because I witnessed, Dennis and his wife, and how close they were, and also at the conference there was a little bit of energy there, we'll say. And it's difficult for me in many ways to be with Dennis and witness kind of his road as he's witnessing mine. Because he called me when I was in Houston getting, my final tests that told me I really had cancer and all this stuff. And he told me about Shannon's cancer and how that happened. And I remember exactly where I was sitting when I got that phone call. Yeah. So, we talked earlier about perseverance and courage, and this is just yet another example of that. Dennis is
heart disease and cancer coming up as a result of box of emotions.
Yeah.
And how we need, that's maybe something we're going to look at in Canada altogether, and how energy moves and changes, and like what we can do to help get that information out to support people. But one thing that, I never even considered that, Dennis. I met you at the conference. I don't recall seeing Shannon. And I do recall spending quite a lot of time with you. I may have seen her briefly at one of the dinner tables, but I don't recall spending as much. I remember cuddling you and spending a lot of time with you and the boys, but I don't recall. I feel that she just needed a break or left you to it in the evening. Is that right?
She did. It. You know what? I have to be honest. The Helping Parents Heal conference was the turnaround for my marriage. It made it better, but when we went there, we were like this. When we left, we were like this. I mean, the sex was great. Wow. It was. Anyways, I had to be Dennis somewhere in this interview. Thank you, Shannon. No, I tried to keep it, PG. But it was a turnaround for our marriage, and I think a lot of that had to do with Shannon going there open-minded, thanks to you, because that was a turnaround for her, and I have to say thanks to Stacy, who she in a gallery reading, Michael came through, and then they talked a lot, and they kind of became friends, and that helped her a lot. And then just her meeting other women there and talking to those women about what they're going through, that was a huge help for her. Huge help. And so Helping Parents Heal is an amazing